Hi, my name is Jerry, I'm a fantasy author, and today I'm here to talk to you some more about prose. In the previous video, I went over some of the fundamental qualities that make your prose better, not in the sense of making your story more interesting, but rather in the sense of creating a richer, more engaging reading experience, sort of like the writing equivalent of aesthetics. And in that video, I also promised a follow-up where I would demonstrate these concepts by taking an actual scene that I wrote and published and giving you a step-by-step breakdown of what techniques I used, where, and why. And as you may figure, this is that follow-up. Now, for those of you who haven't seen the previous video or just haven't memorized every detail of it, here's a quick recap. The three most pivotal qualities of good prose are cohesion, conversation, and intentionality. Number one, good prose is cohesive. For every scene that you write, you should be able to answer the two basic questions of what happens in it and what it's about. The first question referring to the actual key events that occur in the world of your story and move the plot forward, while the second question refers to the broader thematic and emotional context that all the finer details of your scene play into. Number two, good prose creates a conversation between the text and the reader, where you as the author anticipate your reader's moment-to-moment reactions to your text and then write the next bit of prose in response to that reaction. Now, there are many ways to execute this, but the most typical ones are raising questions in the reader and then either answering or deflecting them, encouraging the reader to infer certain details instead of stating them explicitly, and then either confirming or subverting those inferences, and by making promises where you set a clear general direction for the scene so that your reader knows what they have to look forward to, which in turn allows you to make some detours without making it feel like you're rambling. And then number three, good prose is written with purpose and intent. Every word tells its own story. Every sentence follows from the one before it and leads into the one after it, and everything is there for a reason. Now, besides these qualities, I will also be touching on some concepts and techniques that I have covered earlier on this channel, and whenever I do, I will always give a quick summary as well as provide links to the videos where you can learn about them in more detail if you're interested. And so with all of that out of the way, here is the first scene of the first chapter of my first book, A Bad Place to Be a Hero. Tessa sat by the polished ebony table with her back as straight as humanly possible. In her lap, her hands rested in a graceful fold. Her lips curved into a well-rehearsed, modest smile. And across from her, enthroned on their plush bench, were the two people she hoped never to see after tonight. It is a truth, universally acknowledged, that the opening paragraph of any scene is extremely important because that is where you have to set the tone as well as the reader's expectations. And this applies exponentially to the opening paragraph of an entire book because that is your chance to grab your reader's attention, pull them in, and give them a sample of what kind of ride they're in for. And in this scene, I try to accomplish this by starting with a cold open that focuses immediately on our main character, Tessa, and front-loading it with a bunch of questions and inferences that hopefully create tension in the reader. For starters, Tessa is sitting by a table. The narration doesn't tell you where it is, but given that tables are most typically found in dining rooms, you might infer that we are in some sort of domestic setting. And not just any domestic setting, because the table is polished ebony, meaning it is expensive and well maintained. So wherever we are, it is a place of opulence and luxury. And that's important because luxury implies comfort, but the following sentences immediately contradict that. In an earlier video, I talked about the concept of interiority, which is the idea of letting your reader's mind merge with that of your POV character so they perceive the world of the story exactly as the character does. And the ground rule of interiority is that the things you describe are the things your character pays attention to, and the way you describe them is the way the character perceives them. So when the narration says that Tessa is sitting with her back as straight as humanly possible, that's not an objective statement, that is her being acutely self-conscious of her own posture and basically going down a checklist in her head. back straight, hands folded, smile modest. And that smile isn't just modest, it is also well rehearsed, implying that this is not the first time Tessa has been in this situation, but she is hoping it will be the last, because after she has taken fastidious account of her body parts, she then turns her attention to the presumable source of her anxiety, the two people she's hoping never to see after tonight. Now, the phrasing itself obviously makes it pretty clear how Tessa feels about these people, but it's also underlined with a simple visual metaphor. Tessa and these two people aren't sitting around the table, she is on one side, they are on the other. She is sitting alone and uncomfortable, they are enthroned, again, Tessa's perception, on a comfortable bench that they are sharing. Whatever is going on, she is both outnumbered and outranked. And this sentence also continues the inference from the beginning. So if you inferred from the table that we are in a domestic setting, then you can also infer that these people who outrank Tessa in her own home are most likely her parents. All of this is here to create a general sense of tension and unease that will hopefully spark the reader's curiosity as they ask, what's going on? Why is she so nervous? Her suspicion was already raised when Papa called her to dine together. He had returned from his latest travels earlier that day, and Tessa dutifully greeted him in the inner courtyard alongside Mama and the household staff. He gave them both a kiss and had his servant hand over the usual gifts of ointments and hairbrushes he brought with him. Normally, that was where his attention ended. When he expressly asked Tessa to join him and Mama in the evening, she knew he had something important to say. As I mentioned in the previous video, inference always comes with ambiguity, so after you imply a bunch of details about a scene, it's generally a good idea to follow them up with some explicit detail that makes it clear. In this case, you may or may not have assumed that Tessa is having dinner with her parents, but the first sentence of the following paragraph immediately makes that clear. And so, after the opening paragraph created the emotional hook for the scene, this paragraph starts laying the groundwork for answering those two basic questions of what happens and what it's about. The answer to what happens is given by the first and last sentence of the paragraph. Tessa is having dinner with her parents, where her father is about to make some sort of announcement. And then what the scene is about is their less than ideal relationship. When Tessa goes to meet her father, that is not an intimate and emotional moment, it's a ceremony that she participates in out of duty. When he presents her with gifts, they are, in Tessa's perception, the usual gifts. Expensive, but completely lacking in thoughtfulness, and he's not even the person to hand them over. Their relationship is shallow and perfunctory to the point where the three of them having dinner together in their own home is supposed to be an exceptional event. And besides all of this, if you are thinking ahead, based on what a strict and traditional household this seems to be, you might also be able to infer what sort of announcement Papa has in store for his daughter. But the text itself isn't quite there yet. That suspicion was all but confirmed the moment Tessa set foot in the family dining hall. Most days, the marble floor and mahogany walls were illuminated by a single quartz fitted into the chandelier above the table. This time, however, Papa had ordered 4 additional standing lamps to be placed in the 4 corners. Altogether, the 5 glowing crystals flooded the room in light that would have outshone the sun itself. Bright news in bright rooms, went the old Cilician proverb, and Papa was nothing if not traditional. If you have seen my earlier video about the mention, remind, explain approach to world building, then this passage might be familiar from that one, because I have indeed hijacked this paragraph to do a little bit of world building. See, a thing about fantasy is that one of the questions you will probably want to answer early on is what sort of supernatural elements your world has and how prevalent they are. You don't necessarily have to answer this question as early as this, but definitely in the first 1 or 2 chapters at least. In my case, my books are low fantasy, which means they are very much grounded in reality with minimal magical elements, one of them being these glowing crystals that are used as common household lighting. The fact that Tessa acknowledges their presence more or less indifferently implies that they are fairly commonplace, but the fact that having 5 of them in the room is considered extravagant even in this household implies that they are still pretty expensive. But most importantly, even this little bit of sneaky world building ties into what the scene is about, and ultimately everything points in the same direction. There was not a doubt in her mind, Papa had finally scraped her husband. Tessa wanted nothing more than to hear it for herself and be done with it, but of course that would not do. After the ordeal it had been to get their 4th daughter married, there was no way her parents wouldn't take the time to congratulate themselves. Thus, she sat on her cushion, in silence and humility, counting the minutes. Aside from containing some new information, such as Tessa being the youngest of 4 daughters and the only one who's unmarried, this paragraph is mostly just here to kind of cap off this introductory part of the scene. For one, it confirms the reader's inferences that yes, Tessa is probably about to get engaged. And once again, the important details are in the word choices. For one, finally implies that this entire process has been going on for much longer than anyone expected or wanted it to, which in and of itself wouldn't have to be a problem. After all, it is entirely possible that Papa simply wanted the best of the best to marry his precious daughter. Except, again, the following word immediately contradicts that, because Papa didn't find her a husband, he scraped her husband. He wasn't picky, he was desperate. And this dinner isn't so much a celebration of Tessa's bright future, but of his accomplishment. Papa clapped twice, and the serving maids came forward with the food. In mere moments, the black of the table disappeared under trays of olives and cheeses, nuts and fruits, salted and spiced meats, and pitchers of unwatered wine. 3 daughters had already moved out of the Kalou household years ago, but the dinner spread remained the same. At least Tessa didn't have to fight for the best treats anymore. "From my hand to you," Papa announced per custom. Mama and Tessa replied in unison, "May the gods pay it back." So as I said, the previous paragraph capped off the initial part of the scene, confirmed the reader's potential assumption that Tessa is about to get married, and that is also where the prose made a promise to the reader, namely that at some point during this scene, Papa will announce the arrangements he made for Tessa's marriage, and it will definitely go some way. But until then, we have a little bit of time on our hands to learn more about this family, and the first one isn't really anything new. The abundance of the dinner spread, despite literally half the family already having moved away, underlines how prosperous this household is, but also how much Tessa's father is concerned with performance over practicality, which is again reinforced by the ceremonial exchange at the beginning of the meal. Now, this moment where Tessa and her mother both respond to her father in this traditionally subservient manner might create a moment of kinship that could imply that they are sort of allied in this family, but that is once again quickly subverted. Tessa took a plate and promptly heaped it with fresh cheese, rosemary bread, and lentils, all the while ignoring her mother's gaze. She had long given up on moderation, as she had no hope to compete on that front. Not only did Mama consider the mere act of chewing horridly unladylike, but also made a point to always put less on her plate than any of her children. If Tessa had eaten a single roasted almond for dinner, Mama would have sucked the salt off of one, then thrown it away. Even now, at her 4th daughter's engagement, Lady Kalou looked more like a sister to Tessa than a mother. Her hair fell pitch black and perfectly straight onto her naked shoulders, which glistened in the quartz light as though they'd been cast of bronze. A closely cut dress of pure white accented her slender waist, flowed to the floor like fresh milk, and provided a perfect excuse not to eat anything that might leave a stain or a crumb. Over the course of the previous paragraphs that established what kind of presence Tessa's father is, one of the questions that the reader may have raised is, what about the mother? And this is the prose's way of answering that. And the answer is that she's just as bad, if not worse. Not only does she not provide any support for her daughter, she actively works to undermine her. Tessa is well and truly alone. Next to her, Papa showed enough of his age for both of them. His curly hair was more like ash than coal, and his beard did a poor job of hiding his jowls. Most telling, though, were the rows of crow's feet around his eyes. Lord Protector Xanthias Kalou was seldom said to be handsome, but he was nonetheless popular because he always smiled. When Tessa was a girl, that smile made her feel loved and safe. Over the years, she found that Papa smiled like that at everyone, including the trespassers he sentenced to death. The dinner, as always, passed in complete silence. The only sound outside of the table was the tinkle of the wind chimes whenever a breeze blew across the open arches of the dining hall. Summer was less than a month away and threatened with yet another season of feasts and gatherings. With any luck, the first one where Tessa would no longer be seated alone. Or at all if she had the unthinkable fortune of being married outside the province. After the detour about Tessa's mother, these paragraphs guide the scene back to its original trajectory. First, we follow Tessa's attention from her mother to her father. This is where the reader gets a proper physical description of him, as well as some additional details that are specific to his and Tessa's relationship. And then the paragraph after that just indicates the passage of time and takes us back to our original topic as Tessa's thoughts wander about the future. It wasn't until the trays had been cleared away and the coffee brew was served that Papa spoke again. "How wonderful that you could join us," he said, as if Tessa had come to see them from across the world, rather than the west wing of the manor. "Thank you, Papa," she nodded. "It pleases me so to see you again. Have you rested from your journey? I hope it hasn't exhausted you. Did you ride a steam train to Iliasame?" "There's no need to speak so much," Mama said from behind the same thimble of wine she had during the meal. "Your father will share as much as he chooses." "That's all right. It is a special night after all," Papa waved generously. "Yes, I did ride the train. It runs all the way to the border now, and they have all manner of comforts these days. Some of them you can even sleep in. Wouldn't you like to see that, Tessa?" See it and ride it, far away from you, Tessa thought to herself, while she said, "It sounds marvelous, Papa." Her mind and her mouth spoke different words more often than not. "I should imagine. Don't think I haven't noticed you sneaking into my study to pick up my road books," he said, and wagged a playful finger at his daughter. "You didn't notice. The servants told you after you beat them because you thought they were stealing your books." Tessa dropped a piece of rock sugar into her coffee and stirred it to give herself a reason to look away. Although on the surface it doesn't seem to contain any radically new information, this bit of dialogue is here for a number of important reasons. For one, it is simply just a more natural way of leading into our main topic instead of simply opening with Papa making the announcement. Besides that, there's another bit of sneaky world building by mentioning the existence of steam trains and also the fact that they are still kind of a novelty, at least to someone like Tessa's father. But most importantly, it's there for perspective. Because up until now, everything the reader has learned about Tessa's parents, they learned through her point of view. As convincing as her presentation of her mother and father might be, it is still technically only one side of the story, and she might just be wrong. She might be misunderstanding them, or she might be spoiled. This bit of dialogue is there to show Tessa's parents in action, so to say. Tessa is dutifully playing the part of the model daughter, and she gets immediately shut down by her own mother for daring to speak more than 2 sentences. Her father, meanwhile, also continues to perform his role of the head of the family, while in actuality being both clueless as well as just indifferent to his daughter's actual needs. Either way, he was right. Whenever Tessa wasn't in her endless courtesy lessons or embroidery practices, she would snatch one of the many travel journals from Papa's shelf. As she leafed through them in her room, she dreamed of all the lands she would visit one day. That was all she had to look forward to. She watched her 3 sisters be courted by the cream of Cilician nobility and waited year after year to get a life of her own. But her 17th summer came and went with not a suitor in sight. And then 2 more after that. Well, the day you take a journey of your own is closer than you may think. Papa spread his arms and Mama took his hand. Tonight, Thessalona Kalou, is your last night as a maiden. Tessa had feigned shock more than enough times as she listened to the 100th hunting tale from some lordling at a feast. She raised her hand delicately, first to her mouth, then to her bosom, and let out a shuddering breath. "Truly, Papa, have you found me a husband?" "Indeed I have, and not just any husband. You're betrothed to none other than Salamos Magalakis, second son to the great lord of Neosame." Tessa's breath shuddered again. This time it wasn't feigned. "The second son of a great lord," Mama echoed. "Isn't that wonderful?" Her words were kind, but rang with the edge of reproach that Tessa wasn't overflowing with joy. But Tessa had no reason to. Not after hearing the name. Over the years, learning how to be a proper lady, she was made to memorize all the great families of Salis, their titles and accomplishments. The Magalakis had the fealty of Neosame, the furthest and paltriest province of the land. That, in and of itself, would only have been a boon. They also were, however, infamously pious. Tessa wants nothing more than to get out of her parents' house and have a life of her own. And as far as she's concerned, in the world that she's been brought up in, the only way she can get that is by getting married. As the narration says, this is what she's been looking forward to, and now, it seems, even that is being taken away from her. In terms of conversation, there is a brief exchange of question and answer where Papa announces the name of Salamos Magalakis in a way that seems to imply that he's a genuine catch, but Tessa's reaction doesn't seem to confirm that, which in turn makes the reader wonder what's wrong with him. And then the following bit of narration makes it clear. He might be a high-ranking lord, but marrying him is definitely not gonna give Tessa the one thing she wants. If anything, it's gonna take her even further away from it. You want me to be a priest wife? The question tumbled out of her before she could catch herself. High priestess, Mama said slowly, at the head of your own temple. It's a great honor. Papa added, not to mention you'll travel all the way across Salis. You'll see more of it than some of your sisters did. And then I'll never be allowed to leave, Tessa replied. I'll spend every single day leading prayers and singing the same hymns until I die. If Mama had looked like she'd been cast of bronze before, she now was a statue outright. Not an inch of her moved, especially not her eyes as she spoke. How can you only think of yourself? Your father has had to spend so much of his time finding you a husband. You're a fourth child and almost 20. She paused to recover from the thought. None of your sisters put on such an act. That's because they all got proper husbands, Tessa withstood her mother's stare. Emera got a war hero who took her all the way to Midoriya in their first year. Lucia got a ship's captain who sails her across the southern straits every summer. Even Kala got to see new monsters at least. Thessalona, Papa said. Surely you don't blame me because the noblemen of Salis haven't come to court you. Of course she shouldn't. Mama answered in Tessa's stead and rested her hand on her husband's shoulder. You've done more than enough. If she had applied herself better, she could have earned the admiration she thinks she's owed. I've done just as well as my sisters, Tessa said. I learned to sing, dance, and read poetry and be courteous as well as they did. I'm no worse than any of them. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in some cloister. I'd rather marry a spice merchant. If you have seen my earlier video about the language of verbal conflict, then you might recognize that Tessa and her parents are now fighting. Fighting is the stage of conflict where there is still a pretense of argumentation, but it's really about racking up victim points. Tessa's mother highlights how hard her poor father had to work. Tessa's father pretends to try and placate her, but really he's just accusing her of being ungrateful and unfairly blaming him. And meanwhile, Tessa is defending herself, claiming that she put in just as much work as her sisters did. And the stalemate is broken when Tessa's mother decides to pull out the stops. Mama's wine cup rang on the marble floor, and at once the bronze statue came alive. She clasped her stomach with one hand and held her head with the other, all the while wailing desperately. I have raised an ungrateful daughter! Papa cradled her in his arms the way he never did with Tessa and gently rocked her back and forth. "Hush now, dear. You've done nothing of the sort." Tessa agreed wholeheartedly. "You haven't raised any daughter at all." "Our daughter isn't ungrateful," Papa went on, turning to look at her. "Isn't that right, Tessa? You appreciate all that your mother and father have done to provide for you." This moment of Tessa's parents embracing and looking out to her as a third party ties back to the opening image of Tessa's perception as them being on one side together and her on the other side alone. Her parents work flawlessly together as two cogs in a well-oiled guilting machine. He spoke with the same smile as ever, but Tessa wasn't ready to give up yet. If she didn't try everything she could to stop this, she would only have herself to blame when she was carted off to Niosame the next morning. Nothing was too dear, not even her pride. "Papa, I beg you." Her throat was so tight she could hardly press the words out. "Don't make me do this. I'll do better, I swear. I'll apply myself like Mama said. I can wait one more year, or two, or as long as it takes. There must be someone else in Salis who will marry me." Her father shook his head. "Now you're just not talking sense. If I go back on such a promise on a whim, my honor will forever be besmirched. I know you're a good girl, Tessa. You can't possibly want that." With that, he turned back to his wife, who'd been shaking the whole time as though she was having the fits. Tessa had lost. She rose from the table and left the dining hall. Mama's cries stopped before she even passed the threshold. Outside, she hiked up her dress to cross the courtyard. She kept it up when she reached the corridor to the west wing and hurried her steps. With each corner she turned, she walked faster and faster until she was running. So, to reference for the last time one of my earlier videos, in the same one where I talked about the basics of interiority, I also mentioned the importance of writing with conviction. What this means is that when you write your prose, you have to present the facts as your character perceives them, whether they might be right or wrong. The final question here that the reader might raise is, did Tessa have a choice? Was there any way she could have made this work? And the prose's answer to that question is, it doesn't matter. Perhaps she did, perhaps she didn't. At this point, we'll never know, and it's not really important. What is important is that then and there, she was absolutely convinced that there was no other way out. The story isn't asking you to agree with her, it's asking you to understand why she does what she does. The same way how I'm not necessarily asking you to consider this the greatest prose you have ever read, just to understand why I did what I did. So, what do you think? Was any of that useful? Was there something I missed? Was there something I should have talked more about? By all means, let me know in the comments below, and until next time, stay tuned.